Hello, everybody, and welcome back to IGN's Summer of Gaming. My name is Tom Marks, and I'm joined today by Chris Wingard and Nick Mueller, who's a little bit static today, of Curious Panda Games. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing very good. How about you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. We're here to talk about your game, The Iron Oath. So, just to set it up, tell me a bit about the game. What is The Iron Oath?
I think, like at its core, the game is about taking a mercenary company and just like living the life of a mercenary, like owning your own mercenary guild and managing all of that. That's sort of like the main thing that you'll be doing.
And that's through, as we're seeing here, pull up, tactics-based, kind of hex-based gameplay, right? It's a turn-based tactics game at its core as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So you're managing your guild, and then you take them on missions, and then the combat plays out on a hex grid.
And one of the things I wanted to touch on too is you guys started out on Kickstarter, I believe.
Yeah.
How long?
2017.
2017. So you've gone on long, like 3 years now. How has kind of that journey been?
It's been longer than we wanted it to, but we've made a lot of improvements to the game, and we've come a long way, and we're really happy with the state that it's in and where it's going, and really excited for people to get their hands on it, hopefully soon.
Well, since we're seeing it right now, since we're seeing the combat, let's talk about that first. There's a lot of different flavors of turn-based tactics and hex-based stuff and all that sort of goodness. What kind of sets the Iron Oath apart? What did you want out of the combat? What's important to you, and what are players basically going to be thinking about? Like, what do you want them to think about while they're fighting?
You want to tackle that, Chris, or want me to?
Yeah, you can jump in.
Yeah. So we really wanted, firstly, our hero design. We really wanted them to be pretty diverse and not, I guess, a bit different than your stereotypical classes that you'd normally encounter in an RPG, like a guy who's just a tank and a typical mage who has ranged abilities sitting in the back. So we kind of that's our main focus, just having powerful characters who are unique, and then just like the Pyrolancer, for example, that's a guy with black armor and the lance. He's a melee fire mage, so he's an example of that. And basically, we really just wanted to. Sorry.
I was just saying, yeah. Initially, he was just a guy that stood in the back throwing fireballs, and we decided, that'd be kind of boring if we just completely took the tropes of every RPG and instead decided to give a little bit of a twist on all of them. So instead of just standing back and throwing fireballs, he gets up and close and deals fire damage like that.
And that was one thing I was noticing watching this gameplay as well. Is it seems like positioning is really, really important here. We already saw it a little bit earlier, but one character placed a little fire sigil, and then another character knocked them into that, which then knocked that person farther away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of synergies between abilities. Like the Pyrolancer places down that hex, and then there's a lot of abilities that can push or can pull, and so you gotta try to plan ahead and take that into account when you're trying to manipulate your positioning around the enemies and all that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of environmental hazards too. Just then, he was standing on the little glowing hex, and that one, if you're standing on it, you can't use certain abilities. So you have to really plan out where you're going to go. And that was created by one of the enemies attacking. It spawned that beneath him, so you have to move around. But then also you have to really think about where you're going to move to, because like Dungeons and Dragons, there's attack of opportunities. So if you get close to someone and then move away, they're going to get a free hit against you. So you can't just move off of that hex. You have to really think about what you're going to do. Is it worth taking the damage from the movement?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like attack of opportunities is something that I would think I've seen more of that in tactics games, but it feels like this is one of the first I've actually seen lean into that idea.
Yeah, we really wanted to lean into that, and then also have ways around it. It's not gonna one of the problems that we thought we might run into is just characters would funnel to a point, and then they would just trade blows, and then it's done. So, but to counteract that, we have a lot of characters with mobility. So instead of just running into a place, the Valkyrie is a class that she can fly several hexes across. So if she needs to get out of somewhere, she can use that to make a whole lot of distance. and then we have other abilities that can knock back, and then that allows you to walk away without getting hit with the attack of opportunities. There's like environmental hazards, like in a later part, there's like grass on the ground, and if you're standing in the grass, you can freely move through that and not get hit with an attack of opportunity.
And now we're seeing an overworld map screen. Can we tell me a little bit about this world and kind of the outside of combat, but this part of it. You're walking between towns, you're taking on missions as part of this mercenary company, right?
Yeah, this is where you'll be doing like half of the game. Half of the game is kind of in these dungeons doing combat, and the other half is where you're actually managing your guild and exploring the world. And like just then what happened was it was moving to a town, and there was like a dynamic event that happened that said that you've encountered this person that looks like they're in trouble, and you could choose to help them or not help them. So that's where like a lot of the events will come about, is from these just dynamic encounters that come about as you're exploring the world, or dungeons. Like you might run across other events mid-dungeon that are unrelated to the quest you're currently tackling.
Yeah, there's a lot of like text-based encounters. That's part of the inspiration is from D&D in that aspect. It's just, little choose-your-own-adventure type things while you're on a mission. It's not necessarily part of that mission, but it's just something you can choose to do or not do.
And that's also what I feel like what a lot of Dungeons and Dragons campaigns end up becoming, or are from the outset, is essentially a band of mercenaries just running around taking jobs.
Right.
Yeah. I was also a big fan of like Berserk, like the Band of the Hawk, the manga, and I always thought that would be like really fun to be really like play out a scenario like that.
And we mentioned Valkyrie, which is now we're actually seeing in this fight as a class, but the characters specifically, are these randomized characters that kind of get assigned a class? Are they set characters that you'll meet out in the world? How does that sort of aspect of it work?
So they're each class, you recruit them, and they age, they retire, or they die in combat, and then you'll eventually have to replace them by recruiting new people. So the classes themselves, there's 8 classes that we'll be launching with, and they're not tied to a person. The person is dynamically generated whenever you need to recruit someone. And yeah, you just recruit them, you train them up. They have traits, they have personality traits, and there's different skills that you can level up within. They have like their abilities, and you can level up those abilities with different skills to try and augment them.
The characters can also be customized a little bit too. You can tweak the colors. Also, the portraits in the top left, those can all be changed, so you can like give people different hair or hair colors, or different eye color, things like that.
I know one of the things you guys mentioned before we spoke here was the inspirations of kind of Darkest Dungeon and that coming into it. And you mentioned aging, and that sort of reminds me of that these characters are they're finite to a certain extent. You're not going to take one person all the way from the beginning of the game to the end of the game necessarily.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everything you do in the game kind of like costs time, essentially. Like when you're traveling around the world, it takes time. It might take time for characters to heal. Like they can be injured. Like right now on the top left, you'll see there's little icons that show that he's got like an arm injury, a leg injury, and those things take time to heal. And different injuries take longer. Like if you get a light laceration, he might be ready for combat in a week. But if someone gets like a broken leg, they might be out for a couple months. So you have to make sure you have like a nice rotation of characters that you can bring in and out of combat.
Is there a base building management sort of aspect to it? Like how much is that actual management side of things? How deep does that go?
You definitely have to manage. Sorry.
No, sorry. You jump in there.
All right, sure. So you have to manage, the recruitment, obviously, first and foremost, and that was just a violent death right there that just occurred. And so you manage the recruitment aspect, and then you manage when you're recruiting someone, you have to manage the contracts. So the contracts kind of work like sports contracts, basically. So you sign someone, and they'll be with you for 5 years at a certain amount of gold per year. And then once that's up, you got to renegotiate a new contract. And then aside from that, you also have to kind of manage each individual's happiness a little bit. So if you're not using them, or you're not using them in the way they want to be used, or you're making choices that they don't necessarily agree with, they're going to have problems with that, and they might end up leaving your company. So you have to manage that aspect, and then as well with the whole overworld, there's a bunch of different factions. So you have to kind of manage your relationship with all these different factions, choose who you want to ally yourself with, and be wary of who you make enemies with, because they might send bounty hunters after you and stuff like that. So there's a decent amount of management to go on, but there is no base that you have for your company, but there is a skill tree that you can work towards getting different upgrades.
I got to tell you, Football Manager, but for D&D nerds, is something that appeals to me on a deep, deep level. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Thank you to both of you for sitting down with us, talking about it, and showing it off.
Yep. Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it.